Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Bazaar podcast. As per usual, you can find us on YouTube, but also on Spotify or Apple Podcast or via RSS feed for your favorite podcast listening app of choice. Today, you will be listening to me, first of your hosts, MetallFenix, as well as my usual co-host, starting with Sixten
Yes, I'm Sixten, one of the hosts.
and Walter.
This is Ice Club Walter here for Pig Day.
And finally, today we are joined by the lovely GooseFathr. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a bit? Tell the viewers who you are.
Thanks so much. I'm the GooseFathr. I am a pig main. I'm a only pig player. Kind of new streamer. I started streaming the moment the game went into open beta, and went open and live. Yeah, open beta. And this is the first game that I've ever streamed. Kind of a Path of Exile refugee. So I'm really into like overly complex games. Came into this game, fell in love with the complexity. I also just love like the building a broken, powerful board, which was a bit of how that game played. You just design and build a completely busted character that can just raffle stomp everybody. And I found Pig, fell in love with him because that's what he does. And so, yeah, I will say that I do a teaching stream predominantly. The main reason I started streaming is because I found it so complicated to learn this game that I was trying to look for the streamers that I used to watch for Path of Exile, which are like Zizarin, who's a teacher of the game, and he has a lot of like easy, you follow this build and you're going to do okay stuff, and I just couldn't find it here. So I ended up just becoming a streamer once I got my arms around Pig because I wanted to have the resources available that I didn't have. So that'd be me.
And where can people find your streams and videos and stuff? Like I want to make sure you get your plug in.
Yeah, I
before we
stream
start.
on Twitch. At the name you see on the screen is where you'll find me everywhere. I stream on Twitch. I do most of my educational content goes over to YouTube. I'm doing guides and videos there. I'm eventually gonna put my VODs up there as well, but mostly it's just the like shortcut educational stuff is there. Short is a relative word. And then my Discord server is the same name where we do a lot of pig support questions over there, etc.
Nice. All right.
Perfect. I believe that your name also has some fun lore. Why don't you go into that as well?
Well, it's not that interesting. My cat is the goose. We adopted a cat. My wife talked me into adopting a third cat, and it was an older cat named Lucy. And we tend to keep the names of the cats as we get them. But she said Lucy the goose one day, and that kind of stuck. And then eventually she bought me a shirt that she found online that said the GooseFathr, which I think was a hunting shirt of all things, but it was just kind of funny. So that stuck. So that became, when I came to the game, I wanted like a new name when I was going to start my stream than the name that I did in Path of Exile. And that was just the obvious name, because my whole life kind of revolves around this furry creature, so might as well be my namesake.
Yeah, I ended up as Walter Coolest, even though my name isn't even Walter. So I kind of relate to having like I switched. Yeah,
The shocking
okay.
truth
I was gonna say
revealed
I
live
relate to
on the
that. I feel you.
podcast.
I feel you. Yeah.
And then it's a little weird because people call me Goose, and I'm like, well, there is a real Goose, but sure, all right, I'm Goose now.
Yeah, I mean, there's real people named Walter too.
Yeah, we got a real Walter impersonator with us in person.
Yeah, imposter Walter. I mean, whatever. All right.
Yes. But to move on then to, I think you've already given people a vague idea, but more specifically, what have you been playing?
Dooley. I've been playing a lot of Dooley. Yeah, I've been playing around with the new items a little bit. I think I have my arms around them now. So now I'm kind of going back to my style of pig, which is late pig, just trying to get into like the biggest, fattest, most overpowered board that I can, even if I have to sacrifice a little early to get there. I think Fat Pig is doing really well right now. I'm spending a lot of time there, but I've also been just trying to get the nerfed and reworked items off the ground. So I did several Ice Pigs to make sure that Ice Club is fine. It's fine. Rumors of its death have been greatly exaggerated. Yeah, Drum. I've done a couple of games, and without Snowmobile, it's not very good. But with Snowmobile, it's maybe better than it was. It's kind of nuts. Yeah, just been playing around with all the new items. I have to do everything as soon as it gets changed because I'm a teaching stream. So the first, second, and 47th question I'm gonna get asked is how is this new item and how do I play it?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a slave to whatever changes there are. I have to play that as much as possible.
I'm a little bit curious. Back when I did like a big stretch of playing a lot of Pygmalion, one of the items that I think it was like Ragnar at the time clued me onto, like that is kind of underrated, was Silk. And Silk has since been buffed, and I've noticed personally at least that some of the closer fights that I have in at least the mid game against Pygmalion always feels like it is those boards that have that really big silk that can get so scary so quickly, especially with just like a Crusher Claw or something. So I was kind of curious. Have you played around much with the buffed silk, or is that something that you tend to shy away from?
Oh, I played the hell out of Silk. I find that it's a little uneven. You basically have to get money tree so that you have infinite money so that you can scale it early. Otherwise, you can't just run one damage source with it. So running it with Claw in the mid game, your Claw just doesn't do enough, and Claw takes 9 seconds, so you can't survive, for that to swing twice. And so either you have to do the Claw Spike Shield double attack combo, or you have to have had so much money that you can really get Silk fully off the ground. But everybody has in combat damage scaling now. There's too much poison, there's too much burn. You kind of can't get away with just defensively stalling out past day 4. So it's good, and the main reason you play it though is because you can get it day 1, and then you just have a permanent direction. And because it backdoors into Fat Pig really well. So this is a little off topic, but one of the big ways to play Pig well right now is to be using properties as income vehicles. So your money tree is very obvious, but the other one is to use Pawn Shop as a value catch. So if you get it, you just grab it. Now as you're cycling, you're stacking up on Pawn Shop. Well, when you're playing Silk, that's great because obviously you're cycling as much as possible anyway, so you get 1 gold back every time you cycle something. And then you'll run into another Pawn Shop, and suddenly you have one of the hardest to find builds in the game. You have the most important piece already scaled. So one of the reasons I like Silk is because even if you lose that mid game, you can often find yourself in Fat Pig, which is the best late game build available. So yeah, it's really strong right now. It's good. It's just you have to be comfortable losing in the mid game and figuring out how to come back later.
So to add some clarity, especially because we don't tend to have many Pygmalion players on the
Right.
podcast, it's entirely like that's coincidence. We just invite people, but it has happened to play out that not a ton of them have been Pygmalion players. Why don't you give people the brief rundown of I mean, you could run through a couple of what you consider the most relevant Pygmalion archetypes right now and
Yeah.
what categorizes them.
Yeah, well, just to do a shameless self plug, if you go over to any of my sources, so my Twitch, it's !guide. On my YouTube, it's pinned in every single video. I have a spreadsheet that lists every pig archetype in the game, and it has ratings for them in the early, mid, late, and twilight. So that's the resource I normally point people to. But I would say right now, saying what is strong is always hard on pig because what's going to make it to day 16 versus what is consistent are two very different things. But if you manage to find Pawn Shop Belt, and you have 3 losses in you, you could survive 2 to 3 losses. Then that's it. It's Fat Pig. It will make it to day 16. It can become pretty immortal. It's very, very strong. I think it has the strongest. Oh, thanks so much. There it is.
Yes, there we go.
So
I figured I would preview it a little bit for those who have.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, it's extremely in depth. By the like, it's an amazing resource.
Super useful, actually.
Yeah,
And
it's a super
after
good
today, after this podcast, my whole day is clocked out to actually beef this up some more, especially this page to add the new items to it because I haven't gotten around to that yet. So yeah, I talk about how hard it is to force each item. So I give a rating to that and also notes on kind of what you need to force it. And then for each particular build. And then I have the how good it is early, mid, and late, and then what you have to do to achieve those numbers. So like I have Jim, I say is 8 in power early game, but you don't play Jim early game. It's 8 because the build that transitions into it is very strong, which is Weapons Pig. So anyway, yeah, that's what I point people to. But to answer the question, I think Ice Club is still the most consistent. The way I play Pig is I overemphasize shops over encounters like deeply, and so I tend to find Ice Club almost every game. But I a lot of people say it's rare, but I can't tell you, like maybe maybe 1 in 5 games I don't find Ice Club. So that's pretty consistent to find, and then it's very powerful. It's still just as strong now. It basically now takes 5 freezes to activate instead of 4 freezes is the change, but you can use cooldown reduction on your club directly now in order to cheat that down, whereas you used to put your cooldown reduction on the activators. So anyway, I find that really strong. Fat Pig's really strong. And then our early weapon board is a very good tempo play, but it doesn't have good transitions out. So if you know how to play tempo very well, Walter and I were talking about this before the stream, you can easily get 7-8 wins consecutively, and then you have to have played a near perfect tempo game, or you just have to be better at tempo than I am because I don't play tempo very often. You could stretch that into the late game, but if you happen to find all of the pieces, and there is a ton of pieces you have to get together to get 28-hour fitness online, then that's a very strong build that I think can also go pretty late. It requires not just like the 4 component pieces, but also multiple ways to stack value on your items to get them up to speed. So that's a pretty inconsistent but strong when you find it.
But it does transition from the weapons board, which is
it does.
Like,
it is a late
path out from the weapons board.
Yes, yeah, and so if you're in weapons and you lose, that's what you're looking for. If you're like 2 losses down, you're not going to ride showcased into day 12. You either you start trying to transition into that, but I find that I have to just throw it in the trash and do a hard pivot into something else as often as I get all the pieces of 28-hour fitness. It's really inconsistent.
Okay, there we go. We'll definitely talk a bit more Pig when we get to the state of the meta, but Sixten, why don't you tell us a bit about what you've been playing this patch?
Yeah, I've been playing Dooley, and I've been having a lot of fun for the first time in a month with him. So they buffed, among other things, plasma rifle and kinetic cannon. I would say kinetic cannon might be his strongest build currently if you get it early enough and you find solid small items to run with it. Essentially, it's now an engine and a payoff in that it charges your core, but it also, deals a lot of damage on its own. So I've had a lot of success with kinetic cannon builds. I've been playing some railgun if you get it early. A side effect of the changes to XP is that we now have less health per day, as in our health pool, meaning that strategies that revolve around upfront damage, such as railgun or Dualtron, for example, that have like a flat number, are a lot stronger now, right? or cybersecurity. So I would say that Dooley has benefited quite a bit from the XP changes in that sense, because most of Dooley's win conditions don't necessarily scale all that well. But the best scaling option he has currently is Plasma Rifle, I would say. At Diamond, it now gains 60 damage whenever you burn, and also charge itself 1 second. It reminds me of when you have a very strong drill, but your only drill procs are burn, right? So if you play like Ignition Core with drill and you have some crazy scaling source, that's kind of how Plasma Rifle functions now. So there is more redundancy for Dooley. As for how strong he is overall, I think he might still be the weakest hero. He suffers from having, how should we say, he still has fairly weak items overall. Like he has more win conditions now, but he still has a lot of just useless items like Copperhead, like Antimatter Chamber, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I've been having fun with Dooley at least. I average maybe 8 or 9 wins, so not 10 wins quite, but definitely an improvement over last patch. Has anyone else here been playing Dooley?
No, but I was curious. When I've been mostly playing Vanessa, which we'll get to later, but when I was playing, especially during the day of the patch and the day after the patch, I very consistently ran into hydrogen hammer boards that just completely obliterated me.
Oh yeah. Nitrogen Hammer has been buffed in the sense that it now starts silver. However, they did kind of nerf it at diamond. I believe it now stays at 1 second charge at all levels. But yeah, there is also another build he has. The issue with Nitrogen Hammer is kind of Mac has suffered from this as well in the past, where if you get it at silver, it is very difficult to find other sources of freeze that early, right? Like on day 3 or 4.
Right.
So what often happens is that you might have to hedge it, but of course it's quite expensive to hedge it. So I would say it is a strong item and it was buffed, but I still find it fairly awkward because freeze is the hardest kind of requirement to fulfill, right? Like it's the rarest effect or the most expensive one.
So is it almost as if, by comparison now, if you happen to find freeze, it'll be easier to find the
Yeah.
hammer to go with the
Yeah,
freeze,
it is.
but vice versa doesn't work great.
Exactly. So I would say that the benefit now is that if you are looking for a hammer, it is much easier to find it, right? But if you aren't looking for a hammer, it is because Dooley also doesn't, he isn't swimming in gold. Like he still has Dooley still suffers fundamentally from most of the same issues he has suffered from in the last 2 months. In that, unlike Mac or Pygmalion, it's much harder to hedge on Dooley. You simply cannot afford to juggle 3 builds at once. You have to play for tempo. So, for example, if you find a railgun, you're not playing railgun. Like there is no pivoting from railgun to plasma rifle to
Right.
Dualtron. Like you see, like it's you have to stick to the first thing you find that is playable. And since Nitrogen Hammer rarely is playable when you find it, I still find that I ultimately have to pass on it. It is like a very expensive drill in the early game that doesn't work, right? So it's like you're buying a drill that doesn't work. So I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure I like the change because the thing is that it feels like a late game item. Like if you read the hammer, it's like almost like Ice Club for Pig, right? In that it's like for a freeze archetype. So I'm not sure why they specifically made it start at silver. I guess it's to make it more common, but it's kind of awkward in practice. It would be like making, I don't know, like these flashy late game items, making them start earlier is kind of weird to me.
To
but
be fair, I actually do like that seems to be something that they went for a bit more this patch. Like with the Atlas Stone, for example. I'm
I
a
was just
big
gonna say stuff.
yeah. I had a feeling that might be what was coming, but I really like that. It's the same thing for me on Vanessa, for example. There are a lot of items like Arbalest and Elemental Depth Charge that you can tell these items aren't really necessarily meant to be played as silver items, but they are placed at silver rarity to make it so that when you are looking for them, you can find them reasonably often enough, and especially when you think it's a reliable angle to go into, it makes it so much easier to hedge them when like the entry cost is that much lower. So I think it's funny. Anyone who listened to the last episode might recall, I'm pretty sure that I explicitly said that one of the things that I would love to see them do is make dually items like Nitrogen Hammer start at a lower rarity. So when I read the patch notes, I was like, oh.
I mean, our hit
that's
rate for
funny.
like having like the thing with the monster XP is like exactly
Yeah,
what we said
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
Retromation
So-
You guys are
episode,
on
by the
fire.
way.
They listen to your podcast for sure.
So the weird thing
We
is,
can dream.
I'm just gonna say that the weird thing about Dooley is, in some ways, he was actually nerfed, which is it sounds weird to say it, but so for example, take Nitrogen Hammer. It is now worse at diamond. So when you finally have
Yeah.
assembled your freeze archetype, it's now instead of 2 seconds, it's 1. So they effectively, like, when Nitrogen Hammer is at its strongest, it's now much weaker. And then Railgun, which is at its strongest when you fight it early, right? Because it's relative to the opponent, Railgun is very powerful early. It's now 1 second slower at silver. So like, it is a bit weird in that Dooley was the weakest hero, and in some ways, while they did buff him overall, I still find that they kind of didn't buff him quite enough. Like I don't understand why they. I'm not sure how to put it, but it's
I like it a lot in terms of the possible long-term repercussions, where it feels like when you make charging items no longer have this volatile twice the charge with an upgrade versus without, you've at least made it an item that's much more balanceable, in the same way that I feel like Railgun does benefit from having this real other tuning lever of the cooldown changes based on the rarity, so that maybe over time they might need a couple of iterations to get it to the sweet spot. But in theory, we could see a version of the item that feels less oppressive early, but that it doesn't completely fall off a cliff late either, or vice versa for Hydrogen Hammer, maybe actually being a viable comp earlier on if we get an expansion that just happens to have a bit more freeze in it or something. If I just called what the Dooley expansion will be, that's very funny, but I promise.
I mean,
don't
I
have
think
an
they're
answer
trying
ready
to
for you.
address two things simultaneously. Is that on the one hand, like okay, so when you get large silver carry items
Mm-hmm.
on days 3 and 4, they're extremely oppressive, right? And this was
Mm-hmm.
true of Femur, and this was true of Railgun.
Yeah.
And this has been true of other items
Tortuga
on various
recently.
Tortuga, like it's true of other items throughout the game, right? And they're kind of like they've shown over the last few patches that the way they like to handle that is then to give it the scaling down
Mm-hmm.
cooldown, or the other option is just to give it the moose staff treatment, which is just to start at gold.
Yeah.
And I think that for something like Railgun, if you take that approach, you've killed the item. You've turned it into like a
Mm-hmm.
high roll and not like a build. And that you actually do have to, because Railgun does ask, I mean, the strategy of like playing a lot of small tech items has gotten a little bit more involved with the changes to tech, right? Like there's more going on with the tech smalls than there was, like if you remember back when Railgun was at its most OP when it had multicast. um
You pretty much played like the same
yeah,
board
you
every
played the most
time.
zombie board possible, right? You looked at the cooldown numbers on all the small tech items, and you picked the 6 or whatever, the 5 small tech items with the lowest cooldown, and that was your board. And it was literally that simple, right? So, but now there's way more going on with the small techs. They're more varied, they're more interesting. They have um, effects on each other that would make you actually consider playing a medium that isn't atomic clock. Um, so I think there's more going on with the build, and it's good that it starts silver, and that increasing Dooley may be weak overall as a character, but day 3 Railgun on the previous patch was not weak. Day 4 Railgun on the previous patch was not weak. That's not where Dooley suffered. He suffered in the late game, and they actually lowered the cooldown for the Diamond Railgun, right? So they did actually maybe that's not
shifted
like
the power
even. Yeah, they shifted the power. Maybe it's not exactly even to do that. Like maybe that's overall still a nerf, but their head is in the right space of understanding like this card was too strong early and too weak late, and so that's the lever we're going to attack it from. And I think whether the magnitude is correct, the direction is correct.
I will say,
Yeah.
I mean,
we should
I'm
say.
feeling genuinely excited to maybe try Dooley again for the first time, like, probably since the race. Like, it's been a long time since I was like, wow, Dooley seems like it has really fun and unique things that aren't just the same drill board every time.
So before we move on, I have a few more shout outs. So there is the new Unicorn Dooley build that is kind of maybe I don't know if any of you have encountered this build. If anyone is okay, before I mention it, can anyone try and take a guess at what build I'm gonna mention or what items it involves? Does anyone here have an idea?
No.
Okay.
Dooley has so many
Unicorn
weird
Dooley
items.
build?
Yeah, this is the crazy. You guys are gonna have your minds blown.
Is it involve 3D printer?
No, so I mentioned that antimatter chamber.
I actually was about to say I lost to an antimatter board, but I didn't understand it.
However, it wasn't buffed, but what was buffed was Hacksaw.
Did I call it? Wow. I said
Wait,
Hacksaw.
did you call it?
I said Hacksaw.
Did you? Oh, no. Look. So this is crazy. Hacksaw. What is the most? Okay. So sorry for being so rhetorical here, but what is the most dangerous word you can put on an item? I think Walter knows about this.
Double.
Yeah, double. They put the most dangerous word on a dual item for the first time ever. So Hacksaw not doubles its damage whenever you destroy. All right. Then anti-matter chamber gets charged, right? When you use, I believe it's tech items. Yeah, when you use tech items to charge the chamber.
And it's when you use another tech charge this 2 seconds.
Yes.
It destroys itself, and when it's destroyed, it destroys 3 enemy items for the fight.
Yes, it destroys 4 items, alright? So that's double, okay?
And Hacksaw destroys 1 item itself as well.
Yes, so you have 5 doubles effects. So basically, this is the most win more bullshit deck ever. It's like Runic Blade. If Runic Blade also had a dam on the board, all right? So the issue here is, of course, you have to assemble the board, you have to survive for God knows how many seconds. But if you do that, if you have like a fire rebirth, you destroy the opponent's board and you deal 1 trillion damage, which is very funny. So this is like the new, like it's the if you guys are from like Magic or Hearthstone, there is like something known as a Timmy build. Yeah. It's like players who don't care about necessarily having the highest win rate, but they want to have the most broken win condition ever, like the most crazy Exodia.
We're talking about Goose here. It's just the Goose board for Dooley.
I want to put a pin in this for the topic of the week. That one thing I'm worried about with that board is that it needs smalls on the enemy board to beat. And if you have to go
smalls,
late,
I think.
Antimatter chamber is actually size uncapped.
Yeah,
oh god,
it's any size. Yeah.
Which means that antimatter chamber can potentially destroy. So Hacksaw is small or medium.
Which means that it's limited.
Hacksaw will activate the start of combat against like a pig and will break 1 of the mediums. And then antimatter chamber goes off after a few seconds and breaks the remaining medium and 2 largest, leaving no items on the board.
Yes, I'm telling you guys, if you can assemble this board and you find like a shiny tech item or some bullshit like that, or whatever, it is the most broken, unfair, toxic build in the game. Like there is no comparison. You deal 1 trillion damage and you destroy all enemy items. Like it doesn't matter if it's a large item or small. it's gonna get destroyed.
But it
You know,
is
so-
very, very funny because another thing we talked about at the end of last podcast was that we were wondering if they were angling towards having destroy be an intentional late game archetype for Duelie.
Yep, we did say that slash clock stuff, like
Yeah,
cooldown increase.
and I
Yeah.
do think that the thing I like about Antimatter Chamber's design, it's two things. One, in my opinion, one of the most frustrating aspects of permafreeze is that you're just stuck twiddling your thumbs in an unskippable combat
Yeah.
waiting for like Sandstorm to kill you. If we're talking like pure boards that win by locking you out with freeze and doesn't have a meaningful source of damage, that always makes me want to just like Alt F4 and restart the game just so
yeah,
that I
but destroy
don't
is the
have
same
to
thing.
look
Like,
but Hacksaw
destroy freeze is the same
isn't.
thing.
Because if
Yeah,
Hacksaw
but it
just
kills you.
kills you
Yeah,
in
yeah.
one swing,
Right.
it makes me
Yeah, no, but you
way
said like
less tilted.
chamber, like chamber. If you just play chamber on its own, it's the exact same thing as like playing dam without a win condition. Like you're just winning by stalling essentially.
Right,
So it's like
but
the
that's
hacksaw
the
is
thing, right?
yeah.
Dam without a win condition has historically been a pretty bad
Sure,
build.
Yeah,
but it's the
that's not
same as
good. Yeah,
being
yeah.
permafrozen. Is
The
my point. Like it's
reason
the same.
why I like this type of design is because the difference between the permafreeze builds is that usually occurs when you find a way to charge or loop small or quick items like blue bug, like um,
Coolant.
the frost potion on Mac with multicast and stuff like that. But when it's dam or when it's chamber, they open up some interesting dynamics where they're still very vulnerable to quick disruption, like if you're running small text to charge it and the opponent has something like a heavy holsters is one of the more extreme examples, but even like an icicle hitting the chamber, or more importantly, if you're just going with antimatter chamber or stall or dam stall, a lot of the time in the past, I would be able to beat those things just by having fast status applications, which means that I feel like it's something that at least potentially offers a little bit more of a dynamic gameplay between you and the person running effectively the OTK combo deck, which I do like. And obviously, then there's a completely different question about if it's too strong or too weak. But I'm always a little bit happier when I see one of the supposed like very powerful late game combos that still at least involves a gold large, a gold medium, and then needing to fill a criteria in order to charge the large to make it do the thing.
All right, you want to hear the
So-
most disgusting high roll of it?
yeah.
You get a piano and you get intrusion countermeasures, and you put the piano next to the chamber.
That's
That's
extremely
the
funny.
most
That's
degenerate build in the game.
the
You get a
skill that
piano.
makes you
Just get a
activate your
piano.
friends when you go below half health.
Yes. So you just destroy the
So
opponent's
you
board.
make the
Make
antimatter
it actually
chamber
make it
friend.
a shiny piano and a shiny chamber for good measure. Yeah. You also
I would
find
just-
shiny bootstraps.
That's very funny.
If it was me, I would probably just get an obsidian ice club.
Yeah, that's also a toxic combo that just kills
Yeah, if
the
you're just
opponent.
going to include the off-hero items, like
Oh,
Wait, but how does that work? Obsidian Ice Club.
No,
just
you
one
just,
why
you
is
just,
that?
It
you
doesn't
just
matter.
run the Obsidian Ice Club instead of the
Yeah.
Antimatter Chamber.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yes, but
Right, anyway, that's enough Dooley for this.
Yeah.
for this segment. Moving
It was-
on.
it was
Walter,
tongue-in-cheek, yeah.
what have you been up to?
I've been playing Obsidian Ice Club on Mac, and that's why you have that's why I have the okay realistically I've been playing Mac.
I'll bring it
he's-
up just for we'll do a bit of an early board of the week. We'll have one at the start,
Yeah,
one at the
That's
end.
disgusting.
He's just the same. He's definitely worse than pre-patch for sure. Like he's weaker, absolutely. He's still super good. He there's two things that happen. One is piece rot is no longer like just like a free 10 in the bag if you commit to it. It's not. It's way harder to both commit to it as a damage, um, commit to it as a means to put your whole game on. It's much harder to do that, and it's also simultaneously like you're way more engaging and interesting to play. I love the piece raw change. Like it used to be like it used to be the old version. It was like there was basically like two correct strategies. Either you were using it as a pure econ item and you ate the item it generated and sold the gold, or you were using it as a pure carry item and you ate the gold and sold the item, right?
I think the
And
current iteration feels like possibly one of, if not, I think I'm gonna say straight up, I think the current iteration of Peace Rod is the coolest and most interesting economy item that has ever been in the game.
yeah, I don't want to like shit on the maybe Goose has a
No,
you
it's
know
cooler than my shit.
yeah. But yeah, it's very decision intensive and it requires a lot of planning, and it also requires like you kind of understanding like the dynamic of the day, right? So
Mhm.
if I have like a if I have a silver piece raw, for example, and like a random bronze small, like I'm waiting till I want to go to a shop, eating that bronze small to make an extra 3 gold, and then once I'm in that shop, maybe I'm thinking about buying another trash bronze small to eat at the next shop, or maybe I'm thinking the monster I'm gonna fight is gonna drop an item that sells for less than my piece raw eat amount. And so like you have to kind of consider like where you have this incoming flow of items, and those items you want them to be sell for less than the piece raw eat amount, but you also want to buy, ideally you want to buy them for less than the piece raw eat amount, but it's also strictly correct to cycle items of equal gold. So if your piece raw eats for eats for 4 if you have a silver piece rot, and you're going to shop the next node and you're at a shop already, it's correct to spend 4 gold on a silver small to then just eat just to put 2 regen on your piece rot for a net gain of 0 gold, right? So there's this whole like min-max sub game with the regen part of it, but then there's also just like a really interesting econ item where you can turn extra catalysts into gold, which is really powerful. So like if you have an unbalanced inventory where you have too many catalyst makers, you're sitting on a bunch of catalysts, you can eat your bronze chocolate bars, you can eat random curio item. Like there's a lot to do with the card, and it's just interesting. It's like gives you a min-max puzzle to kind of to puzzle over every single hour of the day.
Yeah,
And
Uh,
I
I'm
like
super
that.
jealous. I'm super
yeah.
jealous of the complexity of that income item. We got a lot of complexity on Pig, and it's why I love the hero, but our income is not complex the way to play them. I love that item so much. I want it.
Yeah, I'm
Especially,
I'm hoping it's like a sign of good things to come, you know what I mean,
yeah.
in terms of like the game
Yeah.
design, like yeah.
I think especially when, like, for the longest time, even as recently as the previous iteration of Peace Raw, it's felt like the quote-unquote complexity of managing economy items has been much more about just, oh, I don't have enough bag space, what do I have to give up on? Which is like, yeah, it's complex, it is dynamic, but I don't think it's fun or interesting if that's like the only real vector I'm considering. Whereas when you have this,
Yes.
when it's much more about you thinking and making decision based on like active, when
Space
more
is
of
the
the
least fun
complexity.
constraint to bump up against
Right,
as a
yeah,
Well, like
player.
the
Yeah.
yeah,
best pig
yes,
player in the game is not going to utilize money tree a whole lot better than I am or my viewers are, but the
right.
best
Hmm.
mat player in the game is going to use this item way differently than the average player.
And I also do love that they kept its identity of still being. I think it's perfect when we have items like Peace Rod or Distillery that are dual purpose in the sense that
Yeah.
sometimes you use them for their engine function, like
Yeah,
meta
I'm also
engine. and
I'm also a big fan of
sometimes,
that. Yeah.
yeah, they're actual, real, legitimate alternate angles, but it's perfect when they're items you can kind of always buy and sometimes play. I
I mean,
think,
I also like
yeah,
that they leaned into the regen skill thing and fixed Sifting Pan and made Sifting Pan
yes,
work.
yeah,
So
really
like I
cool.
kind of like that they leaned into the complexity of Mac and said, yes, this isn't the starting character for a reason. This guy is hard to play. He has a lot of different builds. He has a pig-like economy subgame in addition to having many builds that blend into each other in a Vanessa kind of way. So it has like some of the like kind of slow transition dynamics of Vanessa combined with some of the economy dynamics of Pig,
I
and
also think
it's really
that,
cool.
like, between Orange Julian and items like Peace Road, I do like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we inevitably end up seeing some real meta scaling item options on Duelist side as well, which I like because I
You
think
mean besides
it,
memory card?
yeah, besides memory card, because I do think that, like, while it's very problematic if balanced incorrectly. It's such a unique mechanic to the Bazaar that you have these two vectors of the game, of the not in combat and the in combat, and that they have such a dichotomy that it always feels like it would be a shame not to utilize that in unique ways when we have that possibility. So I do like when they do interesting things with it that doesn't just feel like. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
Orange
maybe
most.
Julian.
Six
Yeah.
can comment on because it's very like Slay the Spire coded, right? Like the
Hmm.
meta scaling stuff is kind of like yeah. To me, it comes it's showing the lineage of Slay the Spire in the game of like this, of
Yeah, and
Ritual Dagger
I
in the Slay the Spire version of it, and
want more than anything for both playstyles to be valid because it's the same thing from what I've heard in literally Slay the Spire that
yeah,
some
yes,
people
there's a
really
tension
like those
between the
strategies,
meta
but some
scaling and
people,
the yeah.
yeah, really don't like those strategies, and you can choose depending on your preference, assuming that it's balanced correctly. I personally tend to lean more towards preferring not to use metascaling options, but it's cool that we have more things to do. Big fan.
Hell yeah. Let's
Um,
do the topic of the week because it kind of
yeah, I'll
actually
wrap up with
yeah, sorry.
yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad, my bad.
no. We've just had so much. It's so rare that we've actually
I
played
lost track
all
of who went. Yeah.
characters, so I don't blame you. I've been mostly playing Vanessa. Right now, I want to get more games in to see if it's just like a rough start or not, but it's felt a little bit like it kind of. She had a lot of builds that really, really wanted that level 13 upgrade. It's such a big deal for Keg, it's such a big deal for Depth Charge, it's such a big deal for Figurehead, it's such a big deal for Saloon, it's a massive deal for the even just like the pufferfish or anglerfish. So I've been feeling a little bit like having that delayed by such a significant amount has meant that if I hit that mid game like lull, and I start running into this mid-game Mac dually boards that are very powerful, or even like the Pygmalion boards that have found some early stuff, like some crazy QoS combo or some Ice Club shenanigans. It feels like it's tough to not be at death's door by the time you get to your relevant upgrades, which I don't think that necessarily makes Vanessa bad, since if you go to death's door and make it to the late game on Vanessa, she still has some of the most powerful tools in the entire game at that stage. You gain access to, you have Vanessa's amulet, you have holsters, you have Clamra, And I think I love the new Death's Door option to upgrade silver items to gold. It feels like it opens up a ton of combat potential, especially because then that means that as a Vanessa, for example, you might be able to simultaneously spike multiple of these key upgrades and then make a real comeback. But I don't like playing on 0 health. I always feel like it's so frustrating when you are on the cusp of making a comeback and then you just get one really bad opponent and the run ends at like 5 wins. So we'll see. Maybe I can find more strategies that mitigate that, but it has made me feel like Vanessa might be a touch more. So I'm not going to speak to her power level, I'm just lacking the sample size, but potentially she might be back to feeling a little more frustrating again. And I
From
do. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, from outside the hero, I can't speak to like how consistent she is, but say what you want about Pig. On day 14, I do not want to see Vanessa.
I think I said that literally on the last podcast too. I talk about it so much. The Vanessas
Yeah.
that live until the late game become monsters, which I'll put a pin in that because it's the perfect segue. And before that, I just
I was
wanted to
teeing that up
mention
for you.
too, yeah. I feel like it's really hurt to no longer have access to Proboscis at bronze, because that was one of the most consistent hedges to just make sure that almost no matter what happened, if you ever found shot glasses or a good slow package, you would have something that you could play. But now, if you need to hedge like a anglerfish that's a medium silver that won't be able to solo carry until you get it to gold, it's just a lot higher of it. Like the floor has gotten a lot lower when you don't have that just. If I ever find Curio twice, I'm probably gonna have a Proboscis.
Yeah, I 100% agree that the Proboscis change was completely a stealth Vanessa nerf. That said,
Yeah.
Proboscis, like in the sense that was the most deserved of nerfs of
Yeah,
any Vanessa
I'm
build.
okay with them nerfing that. I think that's fine. It just has me right now feeling like I'm struggling in the mid game on Vanessa just because you get the guaranteed upgrade to gold that much later, and most of her carry items are, I mean, twice as good, if not more, when they get to gold.
Yeah,
Um,
she does seem like she's quite upgrade hungry at this
Yeah, and I just
talents
don't like, if
juncture.
I have to rely on shops for upgrades, it's just never felt consistent. So it's very like when you hit them, you have a really easy time, and when you don't, it's the struggle run. But with that said, I'll move us along to the. I've left the horrid Ice Club Mac monstrosity on the screen. We'll move on to the topic of the week. Where we're going to be talking about actually the survivorship bias, which is a concept, in case people aren't familiar, where it originated in one of the world wars, where when planes came back riddled with bullet holes, they would look at the plane and they would make the parts that had holes stronger so that they wouldn't get holes, until some smart person realized, actually, we should look at where the planes that actually make it back don't have any holes, because those are the parts that need to be the strongest, because if you get a hole there, it means you're not making it back. And that's what we're going to be talking about, except for the Bazaar, how people's perceptions are altered by which boards you actually end up seeing in the end game. Like how my perception, it's not even limited to the end game, my perception of the nitrogen hammer was strongly influenced by the fact that the ones that I faced seemed ridiculously powerful. And then Sixten told me that, well, that's because it's an item that's very hard to manage to put on the board. So, from the perspective of the person who queues into it, it seems way more powerful than it feels as a reliable build for the dually player. But it's basically Walter who came up with this really amazing topic, so I'll let him do the rest of the intro for it in case there's
Yeah,
something I
I
missed.
mean, I think you did a really you did a really good introduction of what survivorship bias is, and survivorship bias is a big part of what we're talking about. It's kind of like the main. It's going to be the main point of controversy of what we're talking about. But what we're talking about broadly is something called compositional effects, and the idea of a compositional effect is like when I face my potential PvP opponent, I can tell the strength of my board, right? And then the strength of the opposing board is you have to think of it like there's a field that consists of all the ghosts that are submitted by every player. And let's say that field is 25% Vanessa and 25% Pig and 25% Dooley and 25% Mac. Of course, that's not true. But imagine that was the field. As we move through the game, that the composition of that field, the percentage of each heroes is going to change as players drop out. And not only that, the types of builds that you're going to play against, the composition of what boards are still alive is going to change. So when you play against a dually on day 11, you're much more likely to face a weapons board or a burn board or something that's falling off compared to when you face a dually on day 14. It's much more likely to be a dualtron, a force field, something that can one shot you, right? So there's these compositional changes of the field that you're expected to fight against as the game moves on, and it comes from this idea of like the weak pigs are dying early and then only the strong pigs remain, and
Right.
the weak Vanessas, they're falling off in the mid game, but the ones that hit keg and all the keg skills, they're going to be really scary going into the late game. And like the people who got shielded on their eels with their card table, they're going to be all the way to day 15. And so like you need to think when you're playing, like the way I approach the Vanessa matchup on day 10 is not the same as the way I approach the Vanessa matchup on day 15. The Vanessa matchup on day 15 is much more likely to be susceptible to freeze, right? They're much more likely to literally have two active items to be like eels plus card table or eels plus Julian. Whereas on day 10, it could just be like literally like Shark Claw's katana falling off. It could be a bunch of ammo items. It could be like aquatics. So there it could be like a depth charge or something with like a lot of items that one time freeze is not necessarily going to be all that effective against. So yes, survivorship bias is a big part of what we're going to talk about, and it's like what drives the conversation. Like this, we've mentioned this on the podcast before. Like the conversations around the game are driven by 10-win victory screenshots, right? Like that's
Right.
what's all over Reddit. That's everywhere. There's so much more to the game than that, but the 10-win victory screenshot is like the survivorship bias. This is the prime example. This is patient zero for survivorship bias, in that the stuff you face and the latter days, like Metal alluded to, does not account for the ability of those builds to make it to those days. And if you can get your head around that, you can see the game more as like a series of, like, imagine you took a screenshot, like you had a victory screen after every single day of the game, right? And you took a screenshot every
Yeah.
single time. And then when people posted their thread, they posted their board on every single day of the game. And that gives you a much, much, much better idea of what it took to get from the start of the game to 10 wins than what that final victory screen shows. And compositional effects are part of that, right? And about what it means to set up your board in a way that you're going after the field for the day you're on. And that's like a skill that is hard, right? It's really hard to like be like, all right, it's day 5, my opponent is Dooley, I'm guessing he has 950 HP, like basically like you can you can put all of your opponent's stats and like guess and say, I'm gonna build my board to do 900 damage by 14 seconds, or my opponent's a pig, it's day 15, I'm gonna put both icicles that I have in my board on and just hope to like get there before I get one shot. You can have a different approach for different stages of the game, and that is going to unlock wins that you wouldn't otherwise have, basically.
I think another great way to kind of lean into the actual, then, now that we've laid out the theory, if we're going to move on to the kind of discussion, this is very much exemplified by discourse around one particular character. It's Pygmalion. We
I
have
don't know what you're talking about, Metal.
handpicked this topic for an episode where we made sure that we had someone intimately familiar with this, and based on the pre-talk, it did sound like you had a lot of thoughts and opinions on it. So I'm just gonna let you take center stage, Goose. Why don't you just start off by pretty much laying out all your thoughts on it, and then we can chime in as we go.
Sure, appreciate that. Yeah, as a pig main, the vitriol on Reddit has always just been a thing you have to weather, and you have to weather it even when pig's terrible, and that's always a little tough to deal with. Um, but I'm a teaching stream and I live for people asking questions. Like, I am not a very fast-paced player because I will just stall the game so I could give like a professorial answer to a really fun question. But the only question I won't answer on stream is who is the strongest hero right now, because I can't answer that question, and I know I can't. I can tell you who's kicking my teeth in, but I don't know how consistent that build is, or how good it is to put together, or how easy. During the Money Tree meta, there was just nonstop yelling for Money Tree to be nerfed. And I was starting to come to the realization that I didn't want to play it. Like, I didn't want to put it on my board because it was game warping, and it was I had to go all in investing on an item that might whiff on day 8. And now I have like a 40% chance of just hard losing investing in that item. It was deeply inconsistent. The only Money Trees you were going up against were the people who either got the damage enchant or they got a rivet gun or a pendulum in order to utilize it as an apocalypse trigger. And those are all rare things. They're just very unlikely to happen. But on day 13, the only pigs you were seeing were those, because the rest of the pigs were losing to those boards. We're starting, like, especially on day 15, 16, the rest of the pigs were losing to the Money Trees that hit. And then all the Money Trees that were bad lost. And one of the most interesting things about the consistency driving the power, the less consistent the hero is in terms of putting something together, it means that they had to find the pieces much, much earlier to get the build online in order to survive. And they had much more time to scale, especially Pig. Pig always has this bias that because all of our power comes from out of combat scaling, the more time you have that board, the more powerful it gets. So the more inconsistent that board is to put together, the more they got rid of everybody else who didn't have that board early. And now the version you're facing is a monster. The more Pig is oppressive in the meta, most of the time, it's because Pig is doing worse. He's being less consistent.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird. One of the things that could make it so that Pig seems less oppressive in the late game would actually be to make him stronger in the early game. Because what happens is that if you
And it's
win
happening right
streak
now.
if you win streak in the early, yeah, I agree, it is happening. I think Vanessa is as scary as Pig if you're on day 15. And the reason for that, I think, is because Pig is actually slightly better in the early
Yep.
game, and the result of that is that if you win streak in the early part of the game and then you start losing, you lose faster than if
Yep.
you
Yeah.
lose in the very early. Like, if you lose day 1 and 2, um, then it like almost doesn't really affect the speed at which you drop out of the game.
It's all
But if
about
you
like
lose,
break points for the
yeah,
renown.
exactly. So like you're not over a break point, so to speak, that determines how many actual losses you need. Like if you start 9-0 then you only need 3 losses to get eliminated. If you start 8-0, then you need 4 losses to get eliminated. If you start 7-0, you need 4, and then like so.
Yep.
So the result
I'll
of
tell you.
that is that aggro decks die fast by day 12 and 13, or
Yeah.
aggro boards, whatever you want to call them, and that it's only the monsters, it's only the one-shotters, the shielded eels, the double whammies, the ice clubs that really go late.
Which I do
And
actually think is a major reason why a lot of the time the comps that feel the most good and consistent are the ones that reliably find power, like in what Goose categorized as the mid game in his study guide, the days 4 to 8. If you're very strong on days 4 to 8, even if you only went like 1 and 2 on days 1 through 3, a lot of the time you're gonna feel super consistent, which I think Mac is perfect example of that. When you can just find things like Poppy Field that power spike you when you get it and put it on your board, and then it lets you maintain this fairly even power curve where you just continue being strong right until the very late game days. And usually at that point, even if you just go 50-50, you had enough life left that 50-50 let you clock out at 10.
yeah, you can definitely. I mean, Poppy Field is a very good example of a board that gets out of the game at day 12 very consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you get hit by a high roll at some point in the game, but like you're still pretty good even in going into 12, 13. Like you got game, you got enchants, you got, sometimes you can go full infinite with multiple spider maze. Like you have means to make your build extend its life in a nice way that I think, where your kind of power is kind of falling off smoothly. Other builds which can't find improvements at all fall right off a cliff, right past day 12. And um it's much nicer feeling to be playing like and maybe that's just a proxy for saying like Poppy Field is really strong. That's probably true.
Everything's a proxy for saying Poppy Field's really strong.
I do also want to point out that I think one of the most interesting things about the Bazaar is, at least when players like us talk about the strength of a build, we're typically referring to its ability to consistently reach 10 wins,
Right.
not its strength in a vacuum against any opposing board.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, being unbeatable on day 14 in a theoretical vacuum is less expected value than simply having won the game by day 10. Um, and this results in exactly what Goose was pointing out. In my opinion, the strongest I think Pygmalion has ever been in the game was during the Crook B meta,
Yep.
where you could pretty much like win streak infinitely if that was the build you were going for. It was like insanely consistent because at the time it was super easy to find Crook, and it was super easy to upgrade Crook. It was really easy to find the B or the caltrops, and so you just had so many outs. You were basically always hitting it, and at the time that only two other heroes were Vanessa and Dooley, who had no shot with an average board against this specific build.
I mean,
But
that's
I
the dream, right? When your tempo build has like backdoors into
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
can also win
But
late. Like
the
that's really
ironic
strong.
thing is that if you were to cherry pick your own board, this might also have been the most beatable late game pig board that
Right.
has ever
Right.
been part of the meta, because it usually relied on flat damage on the reaction item. It had
Right.
very little scaling. It just said, oh, I'll beat like 8 or 9 out of 10 average boards I'll go up against, so I don't need to go over the top because I'll walk into day 10 with nearly full health, and I'll have 3 or 4 fights where I just need to find one board that I guaranteed beat, and then I have 10 wins. So, in theory, if you were to cherry pick an optimal board, even from Pig or from any of the other heroes, it's super easy to come up with something that beats this board, which illustrates that inverse correlation between the stronger a character is, the less they'll tend to need to go over the top in the late game, because they have built-in redundancy where they can play for consistency because they can afford to lose.
Yeah, the strongest. I only have been playing the game since January. I didn't come in October, so I missed a couple of board states. But the strongest Pig ever was for me was when Orion came into the game, and I could fish for
Yeah.
Crook every time,
Yeah.
and now I can force Square Pig. And you weren't particularly terrified of Square Pig late unless you happen to get the belts, the belt phono bonk transition on your Lion Cane. But it didn't matter. I didn't need to go late. I can get that build done in 12 all of the time. It was deeply consistent. And so you just weren't seeing nearly as many like crazy pigs. I don't think Pig felt as oppressive to people. He wasn't the guy that was ending your run, right? He was the guy that was causing you to lose because he took mid game rounds off you. But he wasn't the guy that was ending your run. And because of that, he didn't feel as oppressive, even though, in my opinion, I could force that build almost every game and it was a 10-win guaranteed. I had a crazy 10-win streak. I didn't keep track of it at the time, but I know the number was high. And now, like, you do not want to go against my ghosts when Pig's bad. Like, you just don't. And in fact, the runs where you should be terrified is that I'm 0-4.
Yeah.
Like if I'm 0-4 and then you see my like you're watching my stream, I'm 0-4, and then you see my ghost on day 8, so you know I didn't get knocked out, you're screwed. Like
I remember like so many times when I've been streaming and it's like day 14 and I hover my opponent and I see someone in chat go, "Oh, awesome! It's a no health Vanessa," and I'm just like, "No,
right.
that's
No.
no, that's terrifying. How did she live
Yeah.
until day 14?"
Yeah,
Um,
that's yeah.
yeah.
In
I
fact,
also, yeah.
seeing Pig with the enchant, like just seeing a day 8 Pig that's out of health is always a little bit like,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
it might be over. We might be screwed.
I do also think it's one of those thoughts that have popped into my head occasionally is that, like, I think the only reason Keg is so buried as it is just the sheer fact that historically, except for like brief periods in time, Vanessa archetypically, due to being heavily centered around the concept of early game tempo with her weapon focus and all of that stuff, has never been a character that super consistently needed to force exactly Keg. And if Vanessa had ever been in a spot where her early game just sucked, like if you were playing
Right.
Vanessa and you said, "I expect to be buying Cove and stacking Cove and lose streaking until day 5 and then maybe I can start winning," if that had been the reality, we would probably be in a scenario where almost every Vanessa that made it to late, it would all just be Keg players, and you'd start
Yeah, her win
facing
rate would go
Kegs.
from 70% to 20%, and everyone would complain that Vanessa was OP
Exactly that. Yeah.
because she would end every one of your runs. You would
Yeah.
only see Keg Vanessa, and she would
I
end
think it
every
like
run.
still happens too, even now that like if we say 8 out of 10 Vanessas either win early or die trying, um, all it
Yeah,
takes is one game where you thought you were cooking, and bam, Obsidian Keg player, you're done. And
yeah.
it feels bad. You,
It is.
even
I mean,
though,
it's the run ender. It's the classic
yeah,
run
it
ender.
is
Is the
the
obsidian
run
keg,
ender.
right?
Just close
Like
the
it's.
door on you, slam shut on your face.
I mean, no,
Oh.
yeah, no. I mean, no one likes feeling that, but then, like, I actually think it's healthy for Vanessa. Like, it's important that the heroes have different identities as the game
Yeah.
goes on. And if
Yeah.
Vanessa is keg at the end of the game, like I'm prepared to accept that. Like I think that's fine.
Something is
like
gonna be the best at shutting the door.
exactly,
The same
exactly.
way that I'm never like, I'm glad that I don't have to face too much force field dually, but I can at least
Right.
respect the role that it plays in the game.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like it's very good. It's healthy for me, or in my opinion, when the certain builds serve as constraints on the meta that they say no 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 you're getting out of line, you're taking too long to be
yeah.
effective, or no 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 no
Yeah.
no you're not doing enough damage, I
It's
outscale you
the
defensively with
unique
shield.
thing, right, that happens from the fact that there is actual true PvP in the game
Yep.
causes this very interesting
Yep.
dynamic, I think.
It's the
Yeah.
compositional effects, right?
It's the compositional effects. Yeah.
It matters what my opponents are playing,
Mhm.
and that affects how good what I'm doing is.
I
And
also think, of
And to
course,
answer,
I was gonna say the flip side briefly on why it's important to have these comps is, of course, also because if Keg didn't exist and you were loose streaking on Vanessa, then your run would be over. And such a big part of, I think, Sixten and other Dually players' frustrations with playing Dually is being a tempo-centric character that historically, for most of the game, hasn't really had a Keg.
yeah,
yeah.
you asked me earlier what was strong on Pig, and I started with Fat Pig. And the reason is because of compositional effects. The reason is because right now so many Vanessas are playing Eel, and so they are not playing Keg. And
Yes.
so now my late Vanessa that I'm going up against is gonna not be able to one shot me, not gonna be able to get through my hit points, and I win. So I know that build can go late and I can lean on it. Versus before, when the late Vanessa I was up against was Keg, I'm screwed. Like I can't get away with running Fat Pig against Keg. And so that shift of her having some other really strong builds that people are leaning on, the Eels especially, I'm seeing all the time, and those not being particularly good against my massive health pool, suddenly means that I can play that board again.
I think that's a perfect segue into that. That is kind of touching on the state of the meta. So you could continue a little bit down that kind of thought process. What have you been feeling like are the main things other than Il Vanessa that kind of dictate what you've been trying to do on Pygmalion this patch?
Well, it was all Mac before. For me, my
Mhm.
whole gameplay had to revolve around Mac. And so the new items were very important because you had to get out early because you just couldn't guarantee. You weren't able to play late because Mac could play late better than you can. And I am not seeing that as oppressive. I will occasionally see somebody who got Piece Rod off the ground and then I'm still a little bit screwed. But I'm seeing a pretty even distribution of heroes in the late game now, with the exception of Dooley, poor Dooley. But that means that I'm able to play late and lean late a little bit more. It very much, I'm able to play the way I like to play Pig, which is I'm okay throwing a little bit early so that I can get power so that I can play late instead of doing tempo. But I think tempo Pig is definitely viable. It's just not what I'm as good at. I've never been a tempo player. I've always been kind of a combo player. But yeah, I'd say what I'm noticing the most that's the most oppressive is that the Eels can come online pretty early, and then I can start getting shut out from day 6, 7, 8. And that's usually the time where I am the most comfortable winning. And so now I can win early game, and then I have I have that throw window, and so I'm starting to do the transition into those really powerful builds a little bit late, which feels weird, but yeah.
Does it feel similar to the patch where Femur was OP?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
Okay. That's kind of, I think, the comp. And I apologize if you can hear my neighbor is a lawn nerd. He loves mowing his lawn all hours of the day, every day. But yeah, I think it's comparable to Femur in the way in which both the time at which it comes online in the game and the types of boards it is effective against, and that's what it reminds me of playing against the Eels. Is
For
just kind
me,
of
it feels like Caltrops. kind of
Yeah,
on
fair.
Dually.
That
Just
too.
Oh
I cannot play
God,
the
I would
game on
imagine.
Dually.
Yeah.
It's miserable. I think Dually has the worst matchup into Eels currently. Because
Yeah.
literally every Dually archetype revolves around charging your items a ton
No,
and
I
playing a lot of
think
smalls.
actually, funnily enough, the reason why I've felt like Vanessa isn't that strong, I've reflected over it as we talked during the podcast, is because I don't like playing single weapon boards like Eel, and I love playing exactly the kind of like elemental depth charge boards that get massacred by the Eels. I think they made it right so that yeah, elemental depth charge, it can't even freeze the eels. So if you're going into eels and you're
Right.
trying to play aquatics or anything like that, they're gonna eviscerate you.
Yeah, it's
So
funny how
it's
your
very
play
simple.
style makes you evaluate the meta differently, which is I'm
Mm,
getting nothing,
yeah.
I'm hearing nothing from other pig players, but we're unplayable. How do you win right now, etc. And my win rate's going up. And the reason is because I never liked tempo pig. I love combo pig. And if you're trying to play weapons pig because it is really good early, then you run into eels and you die. And you don't have a way out of that board into a non-spam board. Like your 28-hour fitness is your new endgame pivot, and that spams harder than anything. And so eels is just making you're going to be great early, but you have no way to get out of that board, and then you run face first into eels and you lose. And so all the pigs that are talking to me, they're like, I don't know how to win right now. And it's you have to stop doing that and go back
Yeah.
to working on scaling in your stash, get some monster together, realize you're going to lose those days 5 through 8. Just throw them. I actually am also really a huge fan of throwing on
Hmm.
pig, which is you pick the day that you are going to get the most power out of aggressively shopping and doing that stuff, and then you just throw your board away, pull your pivots down onto your board. You might not even have the full combo yet, and now you can just go ham in the shops on scaling power, and it'll be 2 days of losses until I get the pieces together, but when the pieces come together, I now can't lose.
It's
And that
the like the classic thing that people say in other card games, health is a resource, use it, is something that's very unique to Pygmalion currently in the Bazaar, but it's still so
Yep.
cool to hear you talk about it in this way. And go on, I felt like I almost cut you off there.
No, yeah, that's a great, like, that's very clarifying for like how I was trying to say what I was saying
Hmm.
is that your prestige is a resource for pig in a way that if you play tempo it's not. And I
Yeah.
I have always felt that it was like the best resource is when and how do I want to get to 10, not like can I get to 10 before somebody stops my game. That's how everyone else has to play. I don't. I'm pig.
Hmm.
I get to say what's the day I want to cash out on, and for me it's usually 14 is what I'm aiming for. And so if I'm winning really strong early on weapons, Walter and I were talking about this before the stream. Walter's called me out and he's correct that I could ride that tempo and I could cash out in 10,
Hmm.
probably a lot more than I'm doing. But I don't. I start looking for the day that I can throw all that in the trash to transfer into power to aim for day 14 because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm on day 6 with no losses. I can lose so hard for so long now. I'm going to be unstoppable on day 10.
Yeah, you're licking your lips like I can't believe how many days I get to throw.
No,
Like
I'm
that I
so
will
excited about
say
it.
that is how I felt too when I was playing Pygmalion, and a lot of the time that's how it feels to be playing Vanessa into the keg transition.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
whenever you know that, especially before when you got to 13, so much quicker. When you just know, and before you could even somewhat reliably say, I'll still be alive by the time I get to level 16. So I've had scenarios where I knew that I only had a silver keg coming into 13, but I was still not worried at all because, hey, I'll make it to 16 before
yeah. I
dying.
mean, it
I'll
used to be
just chuck
insanely
in
easy to get
2.
XP past day
Yeah,
10 when
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
all the monsters were easy and they gave 5 XP, like
Which I
except
do
for
think I
Void.
like that that has changed, even though it hurts a playstyle that I enjoyed having. I think the decisions that you have to make now that XP is the scarcest it's ever been are more interesting in a good way.
Yeah, I am actually taking, I mean, day 2 and 3, you do anything to get a vial, don't get me wrong. But after that, I have had some games where I'm like, no XP at all. I'm going to be the level of the day, the whole game. I don't care. I'm just going to go board power to survive and am doing fine with that strategy. I would have never done that before. I would have never thought of it. But I'm like only going to get one level ahead of the day, maybe two. And so like, and I can't rely as easily on that. So why bother? And I like that that's a decision I can make sometimes.
Yeah. It's always so key when there are multiple valid ways of doing things. Especially like it again, it's kind of the cool thing, right, with the way the bazaar is set up, is that since it is still asynchronous, you don't it doesn't as narrowly force people into only one specific playstyle as viable, especially due to this other vector of the days versus the PvP fights, where I've found that I love playing CCGs as well. I've played Hearthstone, Elder Scrolls Legends, Shadowverse, Runeterra, a whole bunch of them, you name it. And oftentimes in those games, it's really common to be in a scenario where people are just saying, yeah, it's a control meta, yeah, it's an aggro meta. And because of the compositional effect of one of those types being prevalent or more powerful, it very narrowly limits the scope of viable decks that you get to play in a way that I haven't been feeling as much with the Bazaar. And I really, really like that. Like, look at a
Yeah.
player like Retromation, who on the podcast, he did tell us that, like, most of the time he just boots up the game, he plays his run, and every time he manages to win with something it's like completely
Right.
different. Like, I dare you,
Right.
he sometimes uploads twice a day and you can't find two videos that are the same. Like, how insane is
Yeah.
that for a game like
And he has that
this?
spreadsheet where he's just trying to
Yeah.
play every single item in the game on his final board, and is pretty close. Like the
Yeah.
man's doing it, and yeah, it's one really impressive, but two really impressive that the game allows for that.
For sure. And to cycle back to how valuable this idea of compositional effect, that again, like, genius move by Walter to bring that up, it's such a good topic. It's
Attaboy,
exactly
Walter.
as you say, understanding the compositional effect of eels being so prevalent, or any caltrop-esque item, any I call them counteraction items, which are
Yeah.
items that counter your actions. So whenever counteraction builds are prevalent, the ability to understand that holistically and adapt around it will make all the difference between your ability to feel completely stifled by the metagame or thrive going against it. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, your reaction is like force field stonks through the roof. Like
Mm-hmm.
the
That
even
pig.
for yeah, fat peg for Mac, it's like, okay, maybe I'm favoring Israt as a better answer to go super
Mhm.
late than something like Poppy. Like, obviously, like, I think Poppy is more powerful like in a vacuum right now, but it gives you pause to think like, okay, Peace Raw has a really good matchup against Eels actually, because their Eels doesn't go
Right.
very fast. It doesn't hit. It's never gonna one. It's not gonna one shot you in the first couple seconds of the game because it hasn't had time to scale yet. You're gonna have 3,000 regen. You don't cast very many. You don't use very many items, right? So, and then you just do a huge one shot for 6,000. That's gonna leave 1,000 burn on them. And so it's like a very anti Eels item.
Yeah.
It is nerfed, but man, that looks attractive if
I,
every single
I'll
Vanessa
say
I'm playing against is Eels.
part of the reason why the Ice Club nerf I don't even feel is because the boards I'm going against, because I'm going against Vanessa and she's doing
Yeah.
single weapons now. Like if I was going against wide Vanessa, if I was going against spam Vanessa, I would probably feel the Ice Club nerf pretty hard. But now like I just
Yeah,
get to beat her.
that's
I
a
just
really
win.
smart observation that the card is nerfed, but but the environment for it is mega buffed, and that
Right.
can
There's
be
a whole
that
yeah,
can be
late
even a
Vanessa
buff
just hard
overall.
loses to me because I get to permafreezer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas
you
late
just hit
Vanessa
99
before
seconds
would
on the eel and it's over, right? Like
yeah.
they actually have 2 items and you're like just 50-50 just to win straight up, and that's if you don't also permafreeze them anyway with your other items, right? Like
And since
that's a
she's
crazy
most
good
of my
matchup.
late matchups, like
Yeah.
Ice Club's better, even though it's nerfed, because of the compositional state of the meta.
Yeah. That's cool. That I really like how it circled around
Yeah.
to that's very
Like it's
satisfying.
so relevant right now of all times too, since we've seen such rapid shifts in the compositional state of the meta. And I do also think it's kind of a doubling up effect on the fact that a tempo like weapon drum pig was drum or 28-hour gym were so popular as items, and because of that, people have wanted to continue playing them,
Yep.
and a lot of the time that makes them Caltrops adjacent. And on top of that, the Void Golem is so much more beatable these days because they
Yeah,
made his skill only trigger on the first item activation, which is another avenue of getting more Caltrops. And if you have Caltrops and eels in the meta, then it, doubles up on punishing any build that goes for a lot of actions very quickly. So I think,
Yeah, I think more punishing to drum than the drum nerf because they did give a snowmobile, which honestly, snowmobile on drum is stronger than the old drum. But drum is not as good right now because single weapons Vanessa just kicks your teeth in.
yeah. Well, okay. I think we covered that quite extensively. So we can move on to the board of the week provided by GooseFathr. I'll, as per usual, run through all the items for any audio-only listeners. We've got a shielded diamond atlas stone, a diamond rivet gun, a addle, a crook, um, lumbors, and then a gold Vanessa's amulet. I'm also noticing you've got a silver rigged going on, and I think that's the skill that gives damage equal to your income. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, damage equal to your income, board market.
Why don't you run us through a little bit what was going on with this board?
Yeah, so this was just me trying to make Atlas Stone work. And I actually caught the last piece I got of the build was my Atlatl, which is why it is so measly at 178. But I ditched Atlatl early. I kept skipping on it because I knew I couldn't play a fast weapons in the meta early. And so I was actually using the slowness of Atlas Stone as the way that I was doing okay against like the reactive boards.
So you were kind of like in the mid game, just running almost naked Atlas Stone, just letting it stack up naturally.
Yeah, I was running Atlas Stone with I got Crook pretty early and I ran those two, and then I just ran non-usable items on the board as much as I could. So that so I only had Crook and Atlas Stone swinging. And then once I got shielded on it, and I was losing a decent amount, don't get me wrong, this was very hard to put together. But once I got shielded on it, then I could start worrying about its speed coming up much faster. Now I could get away with swinging really fast if it meant I was activating this. So once I got Rivet Gun, I started fishing for it Atlatl. I think that there's a square pig variant of this that's very strong with if I had Pendulum instead of Rivet Gun, which I was fishing for, it would have been Infinite. And so it would have been start of combat 1 second into Infinite Atlas Stone, which would have been insane. But alas, it did not come. But I think that this board is very hard to put together. I think Square Pig is very hard to use because you're so used to relying on Atlatl, and Atlatl just is a very bad matchup up against Eels right now. But I was happy to pull it off.
Can I jump in and just say, like, the thing I like the most about the Atlas Stone change or whatever is that, you talk about Apocalypse Pig, it's one of the archetypes from your guide. until now, it's really lacked a
Yep.
pig item that's actually what you
Yep.
kill with. And that you
Yeah,
always
I am.
before you always had to like get a monster or off hero item or like a monster drop. Now you actually have like how is this changing your thinking about Apocalypse and like what you need to put this together? Because I know you rated the consistency very low of it in the past, and that's understandable. But have you revised your thinking about it, or what's your
So
kind of takeaway?
the pieces of yeah, and I've been fishing for it, but the way I actually want to make Apocalypse Pig work right now, the combo that I want to get off the ground, but it's still inconsistent. Even to do this, you still have to find a rivet gun or a pendulum, which means you have to make it to the late game and survive a ways in the late game so you could have a decent amount of day 10 fights. But the other version that's just a pure pig available to us is to run yo-yo with speed gamer. I'm always forgetting the
Speedrunner.
name of that.
Speedrunner.
Speedrunner. You put your speedrunner on a ship in a bottle to get multicast out of it, and then you use that combo to charge your Atlas Stone. Especially if you manage to get a double yo-yo. So that
And so
can
that
be
fits
it.
perfectly on the board with 28-hour fitness plus
Yep.
like a doll plus a yo-yo, and it's like 10 slots exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's like the all pig version of this board.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And you could theoretically, well, it's not all pig because doll isn't pig. But I honestly wouldn't even worry about the damage scaling. I wouldn't even worry about the 28-hour fitness. If you get the combo, if you got double yo-yo into speedrunner and just double yo-yo into speedrunner, but also if speedrunner's getting multicast from ship in a bottle and Atlas Stone, you don't need more board than that. And you shouldn't have anything else on the board that can cast that isn't a toy. But that's the combo I've been kind of chasing. But I gotta be honest, I don't find speedrunner very often, considering I find every other small item really consistently. So I'm not sure why that thing feels like it has such a low drop
I think
rate.
it made a really big difference, especially with the tags that it actually has. They moved it to silver.
Yeah, yeah, it's very hard to find.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm honestly like I think this is one of the coolest pig archetypes is like the apocalypse like build a
Yeah.
doomsday machine
Oh
type
yeah.
of setup. And
And the
I'm
fact that
glad
we
that
have
you
our
have something
internal
for
is
it.
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. I was just saying I think it's really great that you actually have an item for it to focus your game plan around
Yep.
the Atlas Stone to think like, okay, I picked up Atlas Stone early, I'm investing in it. I'm now kind of like I have Apocalypse Pig in my prospectus for this
Yep.
game, like whether or not it actually pans out or not. I think it's
Yeah,
super cool.
and you can come at it both ways now. I can grab Atlas Stone and just be like, I'm gonna work on getting the cooldown. So this was a 4-second stone, right? Because I get to drop, and I didn't get that many feathers, but I get to drop them on it when it's 9 seconds, and so I get to
Yeah.
really bring its cooldown down before I start upgrading it.
Really like that they've been kind of leaning into that mechanic because I think it's a
Me too.
genuinely interesting dynamic. The whole concept
Yeah.
of it's more you get much higher value out of cooldown reductions on items whose own cooldowns reduce over time. I remember early on in the game, they were initially saying that they really didn't like balancing around those effects, so they removed all of the items, or
Right.
they rebalanced items to not gain cooldown reductions. But I think the big thing is that was before we had the guaranteed upgrades, and a lot of the time the
Right.
cooldown reductions were much bigger too. So I feel
Right.
like they've really hit a sweet spot where there's a lot of consistency in knowing which levels you'll get reliable upgrades at,
Yeah.
paired with the fact that we get more loot items from the level up options, but not at the level of like the Wings Feather, like 2 hours that
Yeah.
got
Well,
to stay in
on
the
this
game.
run specifically, I got Atlas Stone on day 1, and I saw it again on day 2, and I skipped it. I saw it again on day 3, and I skipped it because I didn't want to upgrade it yet, because I wanted to get at least 2 seconds off my cooldown before I started upgrading.
Right.
So I got it to 7, and then I started upgrading, knowing now I have a 4-second
So
stone.
did you use in other words, did you use your 7 upgrade to bring it from
Yep.
bronze to silver rather than silver to gold?
No, I did find it before I got to that,
Oh, okay,
and
you did
so
end up,
yeah.
Mhm.
The thing is, you actually get to see this item all the time because
Yeah.
every shop bias has it. So middle, has a medium bias, has it. Isla has a weapons bias, has it. So all of our like people with shop bias have a chance to have it. It also shows up on what's his name, who has health items bias.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you see this item all of the time now, and so you can just
It's in
skip
the
the
shop,
upgrade.
so you want to click anyway most as pig because it's a
Yeah,
medium, and that's the
yeah. So I actually, if you're gonna do Atlas Stone, you'd never know if it's gonna come together. So there's no reason to be buying the upgrades unless you've
Right.
gotten the cooldown on it anyway. So I love that that's the decision. Is like I see an
Yeah,
Atlas Stone, I'm like,
it's
not yet,
yeah,
not yet.
exactly
I
what I
think I could
mean.
get more feathers.
It's
Well, I think
so
that's like kind
cool
of the
with
central.
dynamics like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like what's nice about it is that it's like it's a very distilled form of like the central conflict in the game between investment and power now,
Mm-hmm.
and like
Mm-hmm.
it kind of is it's like a great way because of the type of item it is, where it's like this super cool like nasty combo exponential scaling run ender in the late game. It like really lays bare that choice, like when it's day
Right.
one and you have an Atlas Stone and you walk into Curio and he has a wing and it asks you to make that choice
Mm-hmm.
right
Yep.
there. That is the Bazaar, right? That is
Yep.
the decisions you're making
I
every step of the way
also
throughout the game.
like I loved when they removed the cooldown increase on knee brace to no longer make the knee brace tech be a thing. But I
Right.
also love the fact that rather than removing the mechanic after that in its entirety, what they've done is much more akin to fully bringing it out in the light and making it such a central thing to the way the game plays that I believe it's probably something people catch on to relatively early. And it's not entirely obvious, but this is the kind of game that I think, in order to sustain enough depth to be infinitely replayable, it's going to need to have some things that unfortunately won't be entirely obvious, which is, of course, what makes people like Goose so valuable, the actual educators who'll ease people into this process. But I just think it's so cool when we have things like that. To me, that feels more bizarre than anything else, pretty much. I love it.
Yeah, I've started. I'm hard fishing for feathers now. I'm actually having to run boomerang. Boomerang's always been good, but I am
Mm.
notorious for forgetting to put it on my board
Yes.
and the chat mocking me. And so I started skipping it just because I couldn't handle the humiliation. And now I'm back to just having to forget to put
It's the
boomerang on my board.
biggest single caveat of being a
Oh, it's so
pig
hard.
streamer specifically. If you play
Right.
pig in the comfort of your own home in a deep dark dank dungeon or wherever you play Pygmalion, no one's gonna see you -2 the boomerang.
You were
But
on a previous podcast wondering why there were no pig streamers, and I know the answer to this. I was shouting it at the screen. The answer is because you cannot not misplay 400 times a game.
yes.
Your thing wasn't next to your rewards card. You switched the position of the thing in the stash. You could have held on to that for 3 more seconds before you sold it and gotten a little bit more power. Walter exists in my chat to just call me out 40 times a game. And so people, especially who are like their cachet is having fun and being cool and being good at the game, like you being called out for those failures kind of loses your cachet.
Right, it's sort
Whereas
of hard to look cool playing pig.
whereas I being a teaching streamer, I'm like, I don't have to be good at the game. I just have to be 10% better than you and able to explain how to get that 10% better. And so, I mean, I think I'm okay, but I definitely like it doesn't matter that you watch me misplay and call me out for the misplay because that's not what I'm
I
selling
mean,
as a streamer.
you learn either as a viewer if you're there to learn. You
Right.
learn
Yeah.
both from seeing the correct play and from seeing the misplay called
Yeah,
out. So it
very
doesn't
Yeah.
really affect your end product if your end product is to teach you how to play pig.
I
And
do
That's
Absolutely. But if
think.
why
you're
great.
Yeah.
sorry.
stream
Sixten?
dually,
Yeah.
because if a viewer asks if I misplayed, I just say no, I played for tempo, and then I don't elaborate. Just Tempo King.
Yeah, I was about
Well,
to
this
say,
is
but
my
I
new-
do think that the big reason why Dooley is so popular among streamers is
Mhm.
because he's a very, like, historically has been a pretty streamlined character, which really lends itself to the marathon that it can be to consistently stream for like 8 to 10
Right.
hours every day.
Oh, I would say Vanessa as well, especially if you
Yeah.
enjoyed Crow's Nest in the past. She was extremely streamlined. Of course, you can play
Yeah.
Vanessa super complicated, but you don't
Mhm.
have to.
Right.
So I think those two are the two most streamer-friendly
Definitely, or
heroes,
just, you
whereas
know,
Mac and Pig can be, you know,
Mhm.
hard.
And you know, just like the classic like Ragnar, I'm just gonna play small red cards with holsters type of gaming as well. It's if you have aggro brain, as I like to call it, if you're the kind of player who'll just look at the board and be like, nah, trust this kills them, you can play those styles of Vanessa incredibly streamlined as well. It's
Also, with
like,
the
yeah.
current rank system, I generally think it is better to play fast and misplay than to
Oh,
play
so
slow
much.
and play perfectly.
Yeah,
Like
if
generally,
you
I think
wanna climb,
That's
for
definitely true.
sure.
Yeah,
Can
I don't
I-
even think
can
that
I-
that's controversial, really.
Can I monologue on this for one quick second?
Yeah, go
Because
for it,
this is
go
a big
for
thing.
it.
When people ask who's the strongest hero when they're wanting to get a new hero and they are asking, but they want power and they want to say who's the strongest, I'm like, do you want 10 wins or do you want like the strongest hero is never Pig. It's never Pig, even when it's Pig, because you can get 10 wins in half the time on another hero, climb the ladder faster, and get more like chests and whatnot from the game. So
Yeah.
all of the reward system in the game punishes the way that you get 10 wins out of Pig.
yeah, it's funny,
it
Goose.
is very
Like the
true.
last guest, Martin is like you and Martin are like the polar opposite players.
Mhm.
Like Martin is
I
the
know.
just play fast, sometimes concede on 8 wins. You know, just play, and you're like the opposite. You know, educational, play slowly, try and be a perfectionist. It's just very interesting.
Yeah,
Like
it's the Dooley Pig dichotomy, right?
It
It's
is.
like
Yeah.
they're
That's
like
why he's our
opposite.
mortal
no,
enemy.
but like
That's
we have had Dooley
yeah.
players in the past, like Magma, like even amongst Dooley players, Martin has been like the most extreme. Just maybe
Yeah, there's
Snacer
a
is also
very
tied, but
real dichotomy there as well.
Yeah.
They play
Yeah, put on music and
so
jam, yeah.
efficiently.
Yeah.
no, because like when we have Magma on or even Rarish, like they play Dooley
They do
very
crazy
methodically, or like
stuff.
yeah, they do like they try to be creative on Dooley. Whereas no offense to these, like I'm kind of Snacer brain myself, but like they just force the same strategy and just play fast.
To
play,
like make
and
it
win.
abundantly clear, by no means do we mean to like cast slack on certain ways of playing the game,
No.
especially within the free marketplace of ideas that is Twitch.tv. It's a beautiful thing that you can have all of these varied streamers and play styles, because obviously it means that the viewers get to watch the people not only whose personalities they enjoy, but whose play styles that they enjoy. It's very different, like niches and moods, and personally, nothing makes me happier than seeing so much variety thrive within this community.
Yeah,
That's
and I mean, I think the
beautiful thing.
Snazer Martin Pill style is actually optimal for climbing the current.
No,
rank
it is like
system.
those
for
are the
sure,
highest.
for
Like
sure.
it's what you should be playing if you want to win, like or not
Yep.
win, but
Oh,
profit.
And
climb,
mainly
yeah,
like
yeah.
and I think even as someone who isn't a streamer, it's totally up to you if you feel joy and rewarded for like maximizing your resource gain. You want to
Right.
go for that kind of play style. But if you are more of a Timmy player, if you like making big numbers happen, then by all means play Pygmalion. Do it. He's amazing
Yes.
at it. Like,
Come
if it
to the
makes
dark
you
side.
happy, it's the right way to play the game.
Yep.
Just the last thing is this. So we had Sunny on in the past, but have we had any other exclusive Pig streamers ever? I think
No,
this
it's
is the
mainly
first, right?
Sunny,
Like,
but
not
it's
exclusive.
also...
Sunny.
no, because Sunny wasn't even like he played.
Yeah,
At least
he
now he
plays
plays all
everything.
heroes. I think
I-
Goose
I
like
think
the
We had
first
Whispers
proper.
on.
No, we have not.
No, we haven't.
But
Yeah,
He's
Goose,
the
I think
only
you are-
other pig main that I see,
Yeah.
but he's in my time slot, so there
Yeah,
might be
like
some
I
others.
wouldn't
in some other
call
time
Sunny a
slots.
pig main. Like it's his favorite hero, but he's streaming all the heroes. Like you are the first proper like pig
I
main
think
here,
it's
which is
just
super cool.
because
It's long overdue.
Outside of Dually, I've felt like few people main a character exclusively. There's something
Well,
about
Walter has
Dually
kind
that
of become a Mac main in
Yeah, he
recent.
kinda
right,
has.
but that's more of a just he's enjoying Mac a lot right now. I feel
Right.
like it's definitely possible that he ends up seeing something
Yeah, maybe
else.
I'm like
It's
Jules'
well,
main waiting room.
right?
Like you
Yeah.
don't know. You don't
That's
know
true.
what the future
I
holds.
thought that might happen to me on Mac when he first came out because I
Mm-hmm.
found him really fun and I was trying him for a minute. Unfortunately, being a person who wants to teach and Pig being so slow, I very quickly felt like I was falling behind understanding my hero and I couldn't split my attention. So if I want, this is my brand now, so I'm Pig for life. I can never play anyone else
Yeah.
because it takes it takes 10 hours for me to get like 5 games in.
No, I get
So
that so much too. Where like whenever I want to make new guides for people,
oh god,
it's
yeah.
such a
Oh yeah, you're
big
neglecting
deal.
the pig
Like,
guides.
no, any character, like even learning how to make a dually guide for someone with a full-time job, it's going to be
Yeah.
like a week's worth of investing all of my games into playing whichever character I want to make that guide
Can I just
for.
say I want to shout this out. Your guide series finally got my guide off the ground because I kept waiting
Oh.
until I fully understood the hero. And then I'm 3 days away from a drop patch upgrade. I guess I'll wait till then till I make the guide. And then you came out with like the amazing Mac guide and then just did the follow-up with the Mac items as a secondary video and you didn't retread the old ground. I'm like, of course I had permission to do that. Of course I should like drop the video on what I know. It'll be obsolete tomorrow, but then I can build on what has changed.
Yes,
And that's fine. I don't know why I couldn't get myself to do
One
that
thing,
until I
Goose, is
saw
that
you give me permission to, essentially, by
yeah,
seeing that
I
video
think one
series.
thing, Goose, is that in general, like the for players who are coming from card games, the constant release schedule and changing or
Yeah.
is kind of like the norm, right?
Oh, I'm so not used to that.
We're
Yeah.
really accustomed to that. So I don't really, and I think a lot of the Bazaar audience does have that background, or at least some of that background, that they played Magic or Hearthstone, etc. So they're used to like rotations and changes in the meta. Even people who play League of Legends, that also has bi-weekly patches that shake up the meta. So I think, in some ways, like the community expectation actually is that your content is going to become outdated and that you shouldn't be so, not that you are so scared, but you shouldn't be so concerned about
intimidated, maybe.
intimidated by the fact that something you say may become outdated, because I think
But
the audience
I mean,
has
the other
understanding about that.
yeah, the other problem
They've
though
dealt
is
with it.
like that was like my big video that I released that's now obsolete is an hour long and it took me 60 hours to make and so like and then it was obsolete 3 days later. It's not obsolete, but like the first 5 slides are just wrong. Do not go for tiny furry monster. Don't toy food friend first, right? Like
Yeah.
I have several slides on, so now I now have to race to release a new addendum video to make sure that I'm not teaching people the wrong thing. So
And
the release schedule makes it very hard to produce something that comprehensive.
Yeah, and it's
That's true.
also like I do factor that into my videos a lot. It is a very real
Yeah.
thing where sometimes I've said to myself, okay, I'll wait for Wednesday and then this is the video I'm making if nothing changes. Or other times, like I released a guide on how to pivot, which I intentionally dropped during a time where there were a lot of fluctuations within the actual meta games. I didn't feel confident in making a more specific guide, so I wanted to make an evergreen conceptual guide instead.
Right.
And you do have to think about those things a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, I
Is
find
kind
though
of a big
the
deal.
because like my origin story as a streamer was I wanted to be the Zizarin of this game. I wanted to be the person that was the first time Pig player can go consume their content and learn how to play. I love doing the conceptual stuff, but I feel like it's not tailoring to the audience that I want to be catering to, which is, I mean, I will be dropping those videos, but like I do need to tell you how to survive days 1 through 3 first. And that unfortunately changes every patch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
also
tough to go into those early game specifics when they are going to go and flip the table on the early game in a
Yeah.
mid-season patch, right? Like, I think that there's no way to predict that, and that like the only way through is just to make the content and then
Yep.
just hope the audience is understanding / hope that what you talk about doesn't get invalidated. Like, I
I
don't
think
think anyone will begrudge you.
it's also one of those
They'll
big
appreciate it.
things where, like, at the end of the day, you gotta make the content that your heart goes into. For me, I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
a really big part of it is it's not my current profession, but I spent 3 years studying to become a teacher, and I have actively practiced the profession at times. So it was
Mhm.
very natural that, like, when I thought about which videos would make me really happy to make and that people would
Right.
maybe actually really care about because it's something I'm good at doing, then it had to be teaching. It had to be
Yep.
guides. Like
Yep.
I
Same.
can't just be like, this is how I got rank one playing nothing but Dooley, because it's like
Right.
not me. I wouldn't. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I do love is, as someone who has a full-time job, it's tough to consistently stream on top of that. But
Right.
when it comes to guides, it's something I can be thinking about like 24/7 for days leading up to it, and sneak a bit of work on a presentation in like here and there when I have the time. And then when it comes to actually recording it, a 20-minute video might take me like 2 hours to record through just retake after retake and iteration upon iteration, but it still doesn't change the fact that the time that I need to dedicate to sit down and focus on nothing but purely that is much, much shorter than if I want to
Right.
get, like 60 hours of streaming in a week. That's basically
Yeah, if
going
you
to
have
be
60 hours of
impossible.
playing Dually, like,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be
Or you could be a
that's
moron
probably
and
not
do
compatible with a full-time job.
yeah, or you could be a moron and do both like me, where you consistently stream and you try to produce the videos and you work a job. But
No,
it's
it's
not
mad
the
respect,
which is why I only have one really comprehensive video up right now.
It makes sense, yeah.
So
But it's great. I just love that. For me, it's kind of the essence of what I want out of a live service game. I was in the League of Legends community for like more than a decade, and it was just this thing where you could always keep coming back to the game because it had enough depth and
yeah,
replayability that, there was always something to do regarding it. And it's very fun to see a game that's like the Bazaar exist and thrive within that space, really lean into the aspect of you're not meant to be able to do everything in the game. Most
yeah,
people won't be able to play a ton of every character every patch before things changes. And to me, that's the fun of it. I love the fact that when I boot up the game, I have to sit there and think to myself, oh damn, what am I gonna do? Because there's like three things that I want to do. I want to get in some games on Pygmalion. I want to try out the new Dooley stuff. I want to see how Vanessa feels now. I want to see what Mac is like after the nerfs. I just don't. I need like 7 of myself to do everything I wanted. But that's such a good problem to have.
yeah. Well said.
But with all that said, good
Yeah,
problems
also
to
just
have.
one quick thing.
Yeah.
In case Tempo is listening, since we have had so many suggestions in the past come through, please give us more dinosaurs.
Okay,
Please, please,
hold on.
please.
Give hold on,
Give
I
it
got one too.
Papasar.
Give Boreor a silver knee brace. How nuts is that?
Ooh, that's a
That-
good
I
one,
was gonna
actually.
say you guys have to use this prediction power for good.
Yeah.
Rather than just predicting, you have to like predict what you want in the world, because you guys are like batting 1,000 right now. You might as well use that force for
yeah,
evil.
I'm manifesting Boreor Silver Knee Brace. Give us give the tempo players a reward. Give us something to run away with the game on that fight. I think that would
By
be
the
a
way,
really cool thing.
if that happens, we know for absolute certain they're listening to this podcast, because
Yeah,
that's
and
not
I
a
want,
decision
like, a
they make on their
T-Rex.
own.
Make a T-Rex or something like that. Just give me more
Yes.
To
direct
be
stuff.
fair,
T-Rex.
that one can happen without our interference. There's certainly a possibility.
Sure, but the knee brace on Borear will definitely
Yeah.
be there listening
And
to you.
I hope they are listening. If they are, I want to let them
Wouldn't
know
that
that
be
I think
sweet, though?
they're doing an amazing job on the game. I love this
Oh,
game.
I love this game.
Plain and
Yeah.
simple. But as all good things, they do have to come to an end. We are nearing the 2-hour mark, so we're gonna just wrap it up pretty expeditedly. But remember, you can find more episodes of the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or via RSS feed for your listening app of choice. We record every week. The episodes usually go live on Sundays. We'll be back next week with another exciting guest. However, for now, why don't you send us off with where can people find more of you, Goose?
You can find me on Twitch or on YouTube at TheGooseFathr. That's spelled Fathr, no E at the end. And you can link from there to my Discord. Those are the places.
And of course, as always, all of this will be in the description of the video or podcast as well, so no worries on that front. Walter, what about you?
You can find me in the GooseFathr's chat, backseating the shit out of him like every morning.
All the time. It's amazing.
And what about you, Sixten?
Yeah, you can find me at Twitch at 2Sixten. I also have a YouTube channel, same handle, and a Discord server. I hope to be back streaming this summer a bit more, especially now that Dooley's recovering from the dead, so to speak. Because, when Dooley is good, I'm enjoying the game.
I'm so excited to see whatever the next 2 expansions end up being. It's so hard to know if it's like Dooley and
it has to be Dooley.
Mac. It could be Dooley and Mac, but they might also be like, we don't want to do back-to-back Mac
I think
expansions.
it's gonna be Dooley Vanessa.
That's the other possibility.
Yeah.
I'm so here for either of those two. But mainly, I'm very excited to see more Dooley items. And if you're excited to see more of me, on Twitch, I am MetallFenix, 2 L's and an F, same name as you see on the screen. Stream a bit sporadically, but if you drop a follow at least, you'll be able to tell when I go live. Also have a Discord, which will be in the description, where there's a role for if you want to get pinged, both when I go live, when I upload to YouTube, where it's primarily guides, same name as the Twitch, and when new episodes of the podcast drop, I have a role for that too. But with all that said, thanks a ton to anyone who stuck around to the end for listening. I hope that wherever you are, you have a wonderful morning, day, evening, or night, and that maybe we'll see you all next time.